Welcome to Justice Now, and you've reached the series of Tips for Black Workers, Part 30. And this is going to be twofold. The first part is going to be about strategies of how toxic people will try to draw you into their drama or drama that they wish to create. And then the second part is on casualties and how you will become a casualty if you're not really cognizant of what's happening. So let's talk about how toxic people draw you into their drama. What typically happens is there will be several different strategies used to draw you into another person's drama. The premise of it is to, one, have you a part of the chaos, get you into the chaos, and number two, to blame you. So you would be the patsy if the chaos spills over to disciplinary action. I'll also give you ways of how to avoid it. So how will you be placed into drama? Well, one of the strategies is through disclosure. So oftentimes the toxic person will disclose something about themselves, about their family life, about their social life, about any aspect of their private life, or even make insinuations about what's going on into the workplace. And sometimes it's just a single person that's trying to draw you into that chaos, or sometimes they'll have a co-conspirator to also assist in the process. So I'll give you an example, two examples rather, of how this occurs. The first example was when I was in the formerly hostile workplace that I had left, sent my resignation to. What I noticed in the earlier part when I started, I'd say within the first month, I noticed that there were a couple of, and I use this term loosely, co-workers, but a couple of toxic people that would come to my cubicle, let me know about, any information that I would need to know, such as a particular template that I may need to use if I had asked a question. And then toxic person A would then have toxic person B come on over, and then they would start getting into a gossip about how temperamental one of the managers were. And they would start talking about them around my cubicle. So that's one way in which they try to draw you in, or at least for optics, make it seem as if you are complicit in their gossip about a manager that they feel is temperamental in their emotions. Temperamental meaning that one minute they are fine, the next minute they are very defensive and hard to work with. So that's one example. Another example is there was another time that I used to work in a group home, and there was one toxic coworker that would come and talk about, how she had her child, and her child is doing all these things, including running into the highway, and is just a complete mess, and how she has trouble with the father, and how they're in divorce proceedings, but she doesn't know if she really wants to go through the divorce. And I mean, it's part of the energy draining. It's the dumping, right? So what do you do in those situations? In the first example that I provided, if you encounter a situation like that, what I would highly recommend is, rather than stay at your cubicle or workstation, if you can help it, excuse yourself to go to the washroom. excuse yourself to go to the washroom, break that optic. Um, because they're trying to make it seem as if you're a part of it. And then if anyone asks about, this temporary temperamental manager situation that they're talking about, um, if you're staying there, then they make it seem as if, oh yeah, so and so started the conversation, and they will blame you for it. Um, so to avoid that, get up immediately. You need to go to the washroom, or you need to go and get a bottled water, or you need to go to the photocopying machine, but get yourself out of that area immediately. As soon as they start talking about it, oh, gotta go. And keep continuing that. I had to continue that strategy for a good 5 weeks before they got the message that they cannot try and loop me in um, into the chaos that they were trying to draw in. So that's the first part. Uh, for the second one, where there is the dumping, and this is information that you don't need to hear, you don't like, you can again excuse yourself. But if they are particularly insistent of dumping on you, let them know, is this appropriate? Is this really appropriate? I've even had situations where this was at a women's transitional center, a program rather, where you had women coming from the shelter to go to this program during the daytime to access employment information and to socialize and to access other types of resources. And one of the full-time staff, when I was inside the office where staff usually go to complete their work or access resources, one of the full-time staff talked about how she had um, a, a three-way sexual encounter with a couple of guys from the Middle East. Or, you know, and I mean it like literally. That was one situation. Another situation is, she had an interaction with a black guy, and then she had another interaction with an Aboriginal, and she was just going through her list of sexual escapades, and these types of things are very unnerving, right? I mean, considering the fact that there is sexual harassment policy, um, these types of conversations are unwarranted. They're very uncomfortable, uh, and it's very awkward, right? I mean, you don't talk to this person outside of work. You don't socialize with them outside of work. You just get through the day while you're working, but they're sharing all this intimate, private stuff in their sexual life that you do not need to know, nor do you want to know. I know that I certainly didn't want to know about it. I thought it was rather disgusting hearing about all that. I'm just there to work. I'm not there to listen to other people's sexual escapades. So I was rather surprised that this person was sharing it so freely. So I turned around and I said, is this appropriate? Like, I really feel uncomfortable hearing all of this. And it stopped. Nip it in the bud. Just nip it in the bud. The first time that occurs, you nip it in the bud. And then, again, going back to similar to the video on dumping and energy vampires, you don't know if what the person is saying is true or if they're a pathological liar, right? Evidently, they're saying this to get attention. That seems to be a motivator for them. Is they're that desperate to seek attention that they got to talk about what's going on in their home and family life. And again, it seems that when they begin to engage in conversation with a black person, um, it seems to be negative, very negative each time. Some kind of trauma of some sort, some kind of problem of some sort. as if, your life is just built on problems and therefore more problems should be dumped on you. No, nip that in the bud. You need to defend your time, because when they engage in that, they're stealing your time. And when they engage in that, they're getting you into chaos, or at least attempting to. So you need to make sure that you're protecting yourself. Number one, for the optics. Number two, to defend your time and your energy, because they're trying to steal it. And then the next part I wanted to talk about was casualties. So what happens is, when I had mentioned that the workplace, you got to frame it in terms of a militaristic operation. That's exactly what it is. At least that's what I've concluded. You may come to your own conclusion. And the main reason why it was framed that way is because, they create an intelligence profile on you. They are constantly, excessively monitoring you. They are looking at resource acquisition, even if it means that it's at your expense. So, keep in mind that the workplace is designed to have casualties. And racism by default creates casualties. There's a certain group who identify as white, take all the spoils, take all the credit, take all the excess of the resources. Then there's the buffer. There's the people who are in between, who do similar, may not get as much resource acquisition, but gets some parts of the spoils. And then there's Black people who are often left with nothing, or very little, or substandard uh, things at the end of the day. So you need to recognize that, it's designed to set you up as a casualty. And, these things are hard to accept. These things are really hard to accept. But it's important that you accept it, not accepting it for the sake of it, you're allowing it to happen, quote unquote. It's not a matter of allowing it to happen. It's recognizing that this occurs, and it occurs a lot. In the workplace, I was a casualty. There were several promotions that I should have gotten based on my credentials and did not receive. Not because I wasn't good enough, not because I didn't interview well, but because there were certain people in positions of power that decided to flex their dominant muscle and give it to someone else who looks like them, and mainly because those resources have benefits that are more stable. So, keep in mind that there are casualties in the workplace. Now, keep in mind as well, the workplace also extends into the schools. And I'm going to talk about that in the next video, about how there's casualties in the schools due to racism, and how children as young as 9 are committing suicide because of the constant racial harassment. So stay tuned for more videos.